As it's said that blood is thicker than water, these three tragic family fallouts created serious spiritual turmoil, resulting in powerful hauntings lasting many years. Judge Glanville. The ghost of Judge John Glanville has haunted Kilworthy House in Tavistock, Devon, England for over 400 years. In the 1500s, Judge Glanville broke the heart of his daughter Elizabeth by not allowing her to marry the man she deeply loved, who was a naval lieutenant. The judge, who was known as a ruthless and avaricious man, instead wanted her to marry a Plymouth goldsmith. This man he considered more worthy of her, and even made arrangements for the farcical marriage to take place. In order to escape her arranged union, Elizabeth, with the help of her maid and the beloved sailor, plotted to do away with the goldsmith. Their objective was to rid her of the commitment and free the two lovers to then marry. The appalling deed was carried out, but somehow went wrong because the three were caught and arrested within days. Glanville sat in judgment at the trial and found all three guilty of the heinous crime. He proceeded to sentence them all, including his own daughter, to the gallows. According to accounts over the centuries, for the past 400 years, the ghost of Glanville still haunts Kilworthy House, perhaps as a kind of penitence for taking his own daughter's life. The ghost of Elizabeth, the daughter, is also said to haunt the house, where she will appear in a bedroom dressed in a cloak and hood. On one reported occasion, she was sighted simultaneously by 3 horrified witnesses. Her ghost has also been seen to appear headless in the building and its grounds. The Spencer brothers. A story seemingly handed down over generations is that of 2 brothers who fell out over a prize steer. In 1890, in Brewster County, Texas, Zach and Gil Spencer had been rounding up longhorn cattle when both spotted a massive steer with an impressively wide spread of horns. While the brothers had always been close, tempers had frayed in the hectic roundup and both laid claim to the handsome animal. While Gil suggested they draw straws for him, Zach simply drew his weapon on his sibling. He was instantly grief-stricken as he placed his brother's lifeless body on the back of his horse. An unthinking cowhand asked him how the steer should be branded, and he miserably sobbed that the steer should be branded murder, as should he himself, and set loose. He expressed a hope that the animal haunt the mezza for the next 1,000 years. Adding to the tragic outcome, after burying his brother that afternoon, Zach took his own life. Strangely, a few months after this incident, the branded steer began to appear in distantly separate parts of the countryside. Even more ominously, many people who had even just a passing glimpse of him were fated to some kind of lethal outcome. A cowboy who saw the steer and told his 2 best friends about it slayed them both when they accused him of lying. Hours after spotting the galloping steer, a small rancher fatally downed his brother-in-law in a family argument. In one incident, a runaway boy decided to turn himself in after an encounter with the steer on a lonely trail. When he tried to surrender his weapons to the marshal in the nearest town, his actions were misinterpreted and he was fatally targeted. It became widely believed that the steer had perished in the wild and become a ghost, able to swiftly move across all borders. Its physical description had also changed. The steer was now a bull, but still with its distinctive brand, which was described in 1920 by one witness as large, red, and still raw, as if it had never healed. The witness, Montana rancher Lon Allen, was quoted as saying that the wound had not haired over and looked as red and cruel as the day it had been made. In another tragic incident, a rancher called Fay Dow, who wanted land belonging to Allen and his partner Cole Farrell, managed to convince him that Farrell was courting his girlfriend. The enraged Allen waited, hiding in ambush, for Farrell to approach one evening. It was the Wild West. Around midnight, he heard the sound of hoofbeats on the trail and emerged to find the bull branded murder galloping into the moonlight. In a wild panic, he discharged 4 slugs at head level. The spectre looked at him sadly, then drifted away. Dow heard the retorts and happily rushed to the scene, but as his scheme became evident, there was a showdown wherein he perished and Allen was wounded. In the bizarre trial that followed, Allen acted in his own defence and that of the bull. He admitted that he had witnessed the phantom and targeted a man moments later, but he had known that his partner was riding towards the ranch, and if it wasn't for the bull, his partner would now be gone. The jury deliberated for only 10 minutes before acquitting Allen. The spectral bull, with his macabre brand, faded into history as no one ever saw him again. The Kronbergs. In 1919, innkeepers Lazio and Susie Kronberg were struggling to stay afloat financially following World War I. They had spent all their savings trying to keep their inn in Tizikert, Hungary, operational during the war, but were now broke and facing starvation. Their only daughter had fled to Budapest, where she was now said to be on the game, and their firstborn son Nicholas had also run away at the age of 9 after Lazio beat him for failing at school. 2 other sons had died in the war. The couple finally reached a grim solution, which involved fleecing their guests and worse. In preparation, Lazio dug a long trench 6 feet deep within the woods. This he filled with quicklime while constructing an alibi that he was aiming to build new outhouses. In the meantime, Susie had purchased a small sack of strychnine crystals from the village store, explaining that it was to be used for vermin control. Over the next 3 years, 10 guests breathed their last in the Kronberg Inn after enjoying a meal with a choice vintage of wine heavily laced with the poison. As their stolen wealth increased, Lazio and Susie decided that they would target only one more guest, then the quicklime pit would be sealed forever. On August 14, 1922, a genial rotund man in his mid-30s arrived, carrying a carpet bag so heavy that it must surely contain gold coins. He also explained that he had been a salesman for years and was now looking for good real estate in which to invest his money. On being served the evening meal, he asked that the couple join him for supper and call him by his nickname, Lucky. He was such good company that they felt reluctant to follow through with their plan, but finally served him the special wine and watched as his lips curled back from the final strychnine spasm. Sure enough, they found a fortune in gold coins in Lucky's bag and, on searching his belongings further, found a shocking item. A photograph of the Kronbergs themselves. In dawning horror and grief, they realised that they had dispatched their own long-lost son. They left the gold and returned to the dining room, where they sat down with his slouched figure, wrote a short confession, then drank the special wine. 3 days later, the villagers found the lifeless figures of all 3 and eventually the quicklime pit. It was recorded that during the following years, few ventured inside the house. Occasionally, a potential buyer would stay for 2 or 3 nights, but always flee after witnessing the same grisly apparition. The sight of 13 ghostly figures from the 1920s seated around the dining table next to glasses of wine, and each with a spine-chilling strychnine grin. As the Second World War came and went, the house became increasingly dilapidated, but still no one would stay there, let alone purchase it. Finally, on September 23, 1980, an arsonist got to work and villagers happily gathered to watch the blaze. The old inn was reduced to ashes. Police did not even try to find the culprit, as no one cared, and while Tizikert was at last free of its house of horror, some to this day still believe that the hauntings continue around the site.